Good evening, boils and ghouls, and welcome back to another installment of Campfire storytelling. For all things Halloween, this is hauntformer, or you can just simply call me Mac Ralston. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for returning to the podcast. This is a new endeavor of mine, and the first episode proved pretty well. I actually had an episode 2 already recorded. It is going to be a discussion on the 2018 Slender Man film. Yeah, I remember that. But I realized that episode wasn't really, topical. And this one was, because the movie we're going to be discussing today is in theaters, and it may be one that you've heard about or might be interested in seeing or not interested in seeing, and perhaps you want to get a second opinion, as any good movie reviewer might tell you. I, for one, have heard lots of second, third, fourth, fifth opinions on this movie, from review sites to word of mouth to trailers, and I gotta be honest, I was a little conflicted going into seeing this movie. And that movie, of course, if you haven't read the title yet, is Smile. I saw the trailer for it several months ago, and I found it to be corny looking. Reminded me of that Truth or Dare movie from Blumhouse, which a lot of people are comparing this movie to. Understandably so, because of this whole Smile gimmick in the first place. Truth or Dare, by the way, was a terrible movie, and I usually enjoy the Blumhouse movies, even the lesser popular ones. I actually liked that Fantasy Island movie. I could talk about that in the future. But I digress. Truth or Dare had this like Snapchat filter with smiles. This movie had a similar gimmick going on. And the trailers just look kind of bare. But there were some hopeful moments as of recent. For one, this movie did like a viral marketing campaign where they had actors go to baseball games and smile. So I thought that was kind of creepy. I enjoyed hearing some popular reviewers of mine give this movie positive praise. And Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Fandango, what have you, have given this movie a pretty good score. Now, I usually don't look at the critical scores all that much because I like to just form my own opinion, which is what this show basically is. But I think when there's a unanimous positive buzz about a movie across the board, usually the movie is at least passably good. Smile, as the name would suggest, did not make me smile. However, I wasn't a fan of this flick. And I want to talk about why. Because I feel like I'm in the minority here. I feel like a lot of people are really enjoying this movie. And there are certainly praiseworthy moments, but most of those involve the special effects and the gimmicks and the monsters, or whatever you want to call them. And anything else that I could praise from a story perspective would just be a praise to other movies that Smile is taking inspiration from. Truth or Dare is, of course, one of them. Malignant is another, because of the style of it somewhat. But a big, heavy part of this movie rips straight from the movie it follows, in addition to the movie The Babadook, which I actually quite enjoyed The Babadook, and I'll bring up The Babadook in a little bit. It Follows I wasn't as crazy about. Malignant I quite enjoyed for it, having a fun tongue-in-cheek vibe. And perhaps it's my mindset going into this movie that maybe stumbled me a tad. I wasn't expecting this movie to take itself as seriously as it did. For a movie called Smile, and revolving around this smile gimmick, I thought that this movie was going to be a tongue-in-cheek type of horror movie with some comedy, maybe a little bit of awkward humor. This movie is very dry, very straightforward, and doesn't give you a lot of room to breathe. Now, that's fine for a movie like, say, Hereditary or The Babadook, which are very dark and foreboding, but to me, a premise that involves people smiling at one another kind of warrants a somewhat tongue-in-cheek vibe to it, And this movie felt either pretentious or just taking itself way too seriously. And because of that, it resulted in this very dull experience for me. The movie was very boring overall. And I am a huge fan of very slow burn horror. I love a lot of classic horror films from the 70s that have a very slow burn feel to them. The Exorcist, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, just a couple to name. Even The Wicker Man, which is a lesser beloved movie but still has its cult following. But this movie didn't feel like it was slow for the sake of building tension. It was slow because it didn't really have much to offer other than jump scares. And a movie like this, that I feel like critics really enjoy because of the subtext, which I will talk about in just a second, but a movie that's trying to be this deep and metaphorical or what have you, like The Babadook, really shouldn't vibe or jive with the jump scares. The jump scare thing feels like it should be reserved for the Annabelle movies, for the Conjuring-verse type movies that are just trying to have fun, give you some spooks, and let you go out of the theater with a jolt of excitement from the scare. The Babadook, which I said I would bring up, see, it's already here. The Babadook was this, like, deeper metaphorical movie about depression. It had to do with family trauma. And the Babadook itself, that monster, really wasn't the core of the movie. The core of the movie was the main character and her relationship with her son and dealing with the loss of her husband. And the Babadook, more or less, was an expression of that which she felt. But the Smile entity that's trying to, I think, cover trauma really doesn't have a ton to say about trauma, whereas the Babadook offered different lessons that you could learn about depression and how people cope or deal with it. This movie, Smile, basically proved to me that trauma is traumatic. And there were moments that I thought could enlighten me on the experience of people that have dealt with trauma, but it held back during those moments. Case in point, there's a scene toward the end of the film where the main character expresses to a romantic interest, I suppose, character. He's the cop guy, alright? Cop guy is talking to her toward the end of the movie, and she says, after the passing away of her mother committed self-death, basically. I don't know if I can say the word here on YouTube, But basically, the mother offed herself, and the main character said that because of that trauma, she built walls around herself. Then we cut back to the main character in this house and locks the cop out, and I thought this was going to be some kind of representation for building those walls around herself and having some payoff with the monster. But then the cop guy just kicks the door down and kind of ruins any attempt at the message, at least to me. There were moments where there could have been something said, but most things were left unsaid. However, what was said throughout the movie was the same thing over and over and over again. There are a good, 20 times where the main character says, I watched a woman off herself right in front of me, and she smiled at me. It is repeated so many times throughout the movie that I was really trying to figure out the benefit to having it being said another time. And when I caught on that it was happening, it just kept happening, and it bugged me, but it also made me laugh. So that was something. The movie feels like you're spinning in a circle. You get to a point, and they don't want you to get to the end resolution or the gotcha moment, so the character just hears her phone ringing, which is like a jump scare, picks up her phone, creepy voice, person shows up that smiles, rinse and repeat, end of movie. I will give the director, Parker Finn, this is his first movie, I'll give him that the horror jump scare sequences were set up fairly well. I'm mostly desensitized to the jump scares at this point. I don't really find them scary. I think they're kind of cheap in the realm of horror, because let's face it, if I threw a teddy bear in your face and went, ah, you're probably going to jump. Not because the teddy bear is scary in any way, simply because you're reacting to a loud noise and something going in your peripheral or in your face, you know? So, I feel like the jump scare is a cheap scare, yet I can applaud Parker Finn for at least crafting some interesting setups for the jump scares. But anything that this movie had to offer in terms of scares was largely due to certain creature designs or the way that the smile entity, what have you, utilizes its scaring of Rose, the main character. There are scenes where people tear their faces off and you get this ghoulish, bloody face underneath. There is a scene towards the end with kind of this large monster creature crawling around, and I thought that that was pretty well done. In the trailer, of course, there's a shot where a woman's head cracks like 360. I thought those were all interesting and fun, scary scenes. But most of them are dream and or just daydream sequences that go nowhere and add nothing to the plot or story. They're just shock for the sake of shock. And I just thought they were overall pretty gimmicky, pretty cheap. And if the movie was tongue-in-cheek and just trying to have fun and offering just like light gags and scary nonsense, then I probably would have enjoyed it more. But it took itself so seriously. Had this deep, trying to be like dark subtext about trauma, but then just has these goofy jump scares in it. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like maybe it started as a genuine movie by Parker Finn, but gradually became a studio monster. Now, I can say that all well and good, but the reviews are overall positive, from critics and audiences alike. So perhaps I'm missing something. Perhaps I am being that person that didn't like The Babadook. I really enjoyed The Babadook, personally, but there were a lot of people that didn't, and I feel like they maybe overlooked the theme of the movie, and perhaps that's something that I need to assess when viewing Smile. But I feel like I got a basis of what the movie was trying to tackle. I just think it was handled in not the greatest way. Praises that I can continue to say. I thought the music, composed by Cristobal Tapia de Veer, I hope you pronounced your name right, buddy. I thought the music was creative. I thought that some of the sets, the hospital in particular, was interesting, at least to look at. And again, those monsters. I thought also the lead actress, Susie Bacon, Kevin Bacon's daughter. I thought she did a fine job for the material. But largely her character, and this isn't the fault of her, this is more the script, the character was a one-note character. She is this therapist. I guess I should really explain the plot of the movie. She is a therapist working at a hospital who witnesses a traumatic event with one of her patients. It has to do with this smile thing. We also learn that she had a traumatic past involving the death of her mother, which I talked about. And because of that, she has somewhat isolated herself, but also has a fiance and hangs out with her sister and her brother-in-law and their kid. So obviously she's getting around just fine. But for being a therapist, someone who I would assume is level-headed in the real world, her character acts very neurotic, very crazed. There are moments where she sees like a daydream or sees a spooky image but can't like rationalize to herself that it's not really there. There's no moment where she's like, this isn't real, this isn't real. She just takes all of these strange smile hallucinations as legitimate and can't do anything to help herself. She also snaps very easily at her sister, at her fiance, and within barely meeting the fiance, we go from them being a loving couple to getting in a fight because she witnessed a death at her hospital. She is understandably shaken by it, and her fiance's like, I don't even know if I love you anymore. So I thought he was a very poorly written character. He doesn't even appear in the later half of the movie. He just stops showing up. Same thing with her therapist. There's no closure to any of those characters. They just kind of disappear. There's no mention of her boss at work. We get this cop love interest character who kind of comes back toward the final act of the film, and he has some resolution with her, and witnesses kind of a grisly end at the very end of the movie. I'm trying to dance around some spoiler territory here. But my point is, the characters acted like they were all in a movie about this smile thing. They didn't feel like genuine characters. There are even scenes where this woman comes home when the other characters should really be at work or maybe out on the town, and they're just waiting for her to get home to have the scene happen. Like they read the script, that they were in the movie. There's a great scene where Rose, the title character, she pays a visit to this cop guy, and she knocks, and he immediately opens the door and is like, oh, it's my day off, why are you bothering me? And she's like, I need this cop information, blah, 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 crime information. And he's like, go down to the precinct, I don't have time for this. She's like, just do it. And he's like, fine. And then grabs his laptop, and within 4 seconds pulls up the information. So first of all, if it was your day off, cop sir, why are you just sitting at home waiting for Rose to show up? And second of all, how come you were getting on her and bugging her for bothering you about getting this information, but it took you 4 seconds to punch in something on your laptop to pull up the information? Then he sees a grisly image of a woman, which cops see some pretty dark stuff, and he, like, freaks out over it, even though I feel like a cop really would be desensitized to that kind of information, maybe trying to shield her from it, but he just acted way more outraged by it than a cop character, I think, should be. And she looks at it, and it's like this grisly picture of this woman with, like, her eyes cut out or something. Then they watch this, like, security cam footage of smile people offing themselves, and it just felt very jumbled. That middle act felt extremely jumbled. The final act had a bit more of a structure to it, but again, some of it didn't make any sense. She goes to her childhood home where her mother died, and that's where the entity finally confronts her. Why is this the case? There was no reference to the house before. It's talked about with her mother, but there's no reason why the entity would specifically want to kill her here. In fact, only a few scenes before, the entity, the smile, whatever, I don't know what it really is, some kind of demonic thing, grabs her by the neck and is like, I'll get you, but not yet. Why? Why not just kill her right then and there, smile thing? Why do you have to wait? I get that maybe that's like a metaphorical thing for like trauma lingering, but to me it comes across as making your monster weak. If the monster has the capability to kill or possess someone and doesn't do it, to me it's either playing with its food before it eats it, which could be the case, but it seems kind of counterintuitive for this monster, or it's just lazy writing, and I think it might be the latter. On top of this, the creature, the smile, again, it's very, like, odd as to what the thing actually is, what the MacGuffin actually is, but regardless, it flares up when someone notices a traumatic event, okay? It's an allegory for trauma, basically. Okay, I follow that. How come this thing didn't show up when this girl was a child and witnessed the death of her mother? A very traumatic incident that she references multiple times throughout the film. Is it because her mother didn't have the smile? Did the mother not smile? How come it took this new traumatic event to flare it up? I suppose if I had to read into what the movie was trying to go for, maybe it's saying that a present traumatic experience can unlock one from your past. I suppose that could be the idea, but again, it felt very cluttered and kind of an afterthought. Like, they just wanted to add in this past trauma to add more depth or weight to the movie. There's also a few scenes, I should say, of Rose going to visit her sister. One is a birthday party scene where she gives her nephew a gift. Spoiler alert, only to find out that it's her dead cat wrapped in a shoebox, and he freaks out, as you would, as a child, getting a dead cat in your box, which is kind of funny because I mentioned to my friend who I saw the movie with, I'm like, there's going to be a dead cat in that box. And there was. Reminded me of Christmas Vacation for some reason with Aunt Bethany. But suffice to say, how did the cat get in the box? Did the Smile entity possess the cat? I'm sorry, did it possess her to put the cat in the box? Did it possess the cat? Did it possess her fiance to put the cat in the box? How did the cat get in the box, and why did she wrap it and give it to her nephew? Doesn't make any sense unless it just paranormally made the cat appear in a gift box. I'm very confused about how that all works. I hope someone can explain that to me. Perhaps I'm just too dumb to figure this stuff out, but I have a feeling that a lot of this was just afterthought and just, let's make it spooky, put the dead cat in the box, it'll be creepy. Why is it in the box? Who cares? It's scary images to look at. Ooh. So she gives her nephew this dead cat, and immediately starts freaking out. Everyone at the party is scared, as you would, seeing a dead cat being pulled out of a box by a child. And the sister, backflips into a glass table, and there's glass going up and down her arm, and she's bleeding. And her sister and her brother-in-law are just standing there and don't help her or offer anything. They just watch her as she screams on the ground. All of the characters had little motivation as to why they were doing what they were doing. Again, I can praise Parker Finn for setting up scare sequences, but I feel like some of the setups were just for the scare and didn't make sense for character motivation. And that's something that is a through line that I notice very quickly in a lot of movies when character choices or behaviors don't make sense for what they're doing. And that stuck out many times over in this movie. Characters not acting as they're supposed to. There's a scene towards the beginning of the movie where we see this guy smiling. It's in the trailer. He's sitting on the edge of a bed smiling. And she freaks out and calls the hotel staff to subdue him. We then notice that he was sleeping the entire time on the couch. There's a very sharp cut where we notice that he's been sleeping in the hospital room. But what doesn't really make any sense to me is that the smile thing, at least later in the movie, when it, takes over the role of, say, her therapist, when it disguises itself or what have you, it doesn't appear while the person's actually there. It waits until Rose is separated from this person and then pretends to be the person, kind of like The Thing. In this scene, it appears like in front of where this guy's sleeping, yet she can't see him now. It felt like they just wanted to fake out the audience, so they took the logic out just to have it be more spooky. I don't like when the story is ruined for the sake of the scare. I think first and foremost, a horror movie should be just a good movie, and then have good scary sequences in it. This movie is structured around just having spooky jump scares, and to me, the story suffers because of it and becomes very lazy, very boring, and very repetitive. I wanted to praise Smile more, I really did, and I might be missing something. But the issue is, I found the movie to be so dull that I would have trouble revisiting this movie in the future. There were some gore sequences that I liked. There were some moments that I thought were a little bit jolting or gory or creepy in some way. Mostly, again, the monsters, but they were just kind of random dream sequences. But I don't know. I guess this will be one that's left up for debate. I didn't care for it. A lot of people did. As you can tell throughout this kind of podcast, I've been breaking down this movie and processing it because I just saw it. I want to hear your opinions in the comments. What did you think about Smile? Because to me, it felt like they just kept repeating that the smile was going to get this lady, and then the movie ended. And there wasn't a ton to it. There might be something about trauma, trying to open up this conversation about traumatic experiences being passed from person to person. I suppose that's a worthwhile and noble subject to tackle. I think it's an important one. But when there's so many cheesy, gimmicky jump scares, it's hard for me to take that subject matter seriously. So that's kind of my stance on the movie. I wanted to like it more. I didn't. But maybe you will. Let me know what you thought or think whenever you see this movie in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back, like I said, with that Slender Man review, because I know you're so excited to hear about Slender Man from like 4 years ago. Yeah. See you in the next one, folks. And remember, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer. You can't see me right now, but I'm smiling.